Have we started?
Recording is on.
Okay. Well, it is great pleasure really to be introducing this panel discussion with most renowned and skillful professionals when it comes to not only their own subject in real life, but also in Second Life and virtual worlds. First of all, let me introduce you to Dr. Cynthia Calongne, or Lyr Lobo in Second Life. Lyr Lobo is a professor, author, and researcher with 28 years of experience in developing virtual environments and teaching at Colorado Technical University, Parker University, and SEMO. She teaches doctoral classes in AI for real-world problem solving. In OpenSimulator and Second Life, she taught 62 higher education classes. In 2010, Andy, Cynthia, and Mike McCrocklin won the first $25,000 grand prize in the Federal Virtual World Challenge for the Mars Expedition Strategy Challenge. Today, they research the integration of AI and game simulations in virtual worlds. Thank you for being here, Cynthia. And next we have Dr. Andrew Stricker, aka Spinoza Quinnell, who supported Air University and Air Force education through his work as an instructional architect and designer and developer of advanced simulations and games. Prior to this work at Air University, Andrew worked at Vanderbilt University's Medical School as Associate Provost for Innovation Through Technology. Andrew also served 27 years as an Air Force officer and scientist specializing in behavioral sciences and human factors engineering. Andrew's graduate work was conducted at Texas A&M University, College Station, Texas, and Yale University, New Haven, Connecticut. And also Dr. Scott Grant of the Monash University in Australia, who has a passion for teaching Chinese and culture, language and culture, and is particularly interested in the use of digital technology and ICT to enhance learner experience. His current focus is on virtual worlds, VR, and augmented reality, and developing educational simulations that complement more traditional curriculum, both classroom-based and online. His PhD thesis is entitled Getting Immersed in Chinese, Task-Based Language Learning in a 3D Virtual World Simulation. But we also have KathyRoze here, and perhaps Dr. Scott can explain and introduce us to Kathy, who is a most amazing interlocutor. She's very skillful. Welcome, all three of you, all four of you, in fact. So, would you like to tell us about this experience? It's been a very long journey for you, and you're always ahead of times in terms of this type of technology in connection with your profession. Shall I start with the lady first? Dr. Calongne, Cynthia, would you like to tell us a little bit about AI in virtual worlds beyond the headlines? What is it for you?
Hi, well, hello everyone. You know, at an earlier one of these conferences, I think it was like 2014 or 2013, I gave a keynote on our use of Pandora bots back then as a form of interaction here in world, right? So we've come a long way. We've probably been using that technology for about 15 years, and now we're using generative AI in OpenSimulator. And of course, Dr. Stricker, Andy, who's Spinoza Quinnell, or I call him Spin quite often, will tell us more about that as well. So we're using AI to not just augment the experience, to give feedback to learners or users, but also to form an interactive component where we can learn from their behavior, their questions, the things they do, and store this data in a data dashboard for later analysis. Andy, did you want to chime in at this point? We normally spin off of each other, by the way.
I like that. Yes, it's been a wonderful journey over the years. I got involved in AI. I was one of the first Air Force Institute technology students to get a degree in AI back in the late 80s. And I've built AI systems for Department of Defense. And it's been a journey. Started out using Lisp and Prolog, and now we're all the way up to very powerful capabilities involved with cloud computing and Python. But the biggest satisfaction I've had over the years is seeing the value of collaborative effort. And Cynthia and I have known each other for most of our adult lives.
That's right.
and and the joy of doing things in a virtual immersive 3D world is just not comparable to when you work on projects in isolated teams and so forth. But when we are out here and we're developing learning simulations using AI, it's just immensely satisfying to do it as part of a community effort. And maybe we'll talk more about some of the things we've done recently with AI in 3D worlds. But it's great to be here.
Yes, we have some examples where we're not just talking to it, but Andy actually has the AI system generating stories, recording voices, and then, of course, creating videos where it's telling stories about some of our game simulations.
We've been involved with OpenAI. I've been with their efforts as a developer for several years from the beginning of their journey, and I've kind of witnessed, a really wonderful capability of the generative pre-trained transformers GPT models, large language models. Right now, we're using primarily the 3.5 turbo Da Vinci engine, and that has 175 billion parameters. So you can imagine the power. When I first got started with GPTs, we were at 125 million parameters. So just within a few years, you can see the tremendous computational power that has gone into these models and engines. And we just implemented GPT 4.0 in our work. So we actually can toggle between the Da Vinci model 3.5 turbo and do it 4.0. But what's wonderful is that with GPT 3.5 turbo, we can do our simulations with using AI at 1/10 of the cost from GPT 4.0 and still get pretty impressive results.
Now that brings up another question, Andy. I was thinking about this while I was watching them put the API in the local chatbot here.
Uh-huh.
What are the costs? If you integrate, and for our audience, we've integrated it in our local chat, so learners are able to talk to the Red Queen, which is our name for our Chat GPT, can talk directly to her, have her respond in the local chat. And the question is, based on tokenization, what are the costs for that?
Yeah, it's actually pennies on the dollar, and so
That's good.
it is absolutely wonderful. As I've been with OpenAI from the beginning, I have a very good cost factor. So I'm literally only paying a couple dollars per month for these enormous capabilities. And people sometimes ask us, well, why is the platform? We have an integrated platform where we train the model that we're using in the context of its use. And when we have it also prompt templates for how you generate the voices and the videos and the dialogues and so forth. And we do that with our platform. And we named it the Red Queen because we've always been fascinated with the story, you know, the Lewis Carroll fantasy novel Through the Looking Glass, and how Alice is trying to make sense of her interactions with the Red Queen. And in so much of the things that Lyr and I, Cynthia and I, work on in complex problem solving, that's the hardest part, is helping people understand how to deal with complexity and chaos, you know, where you don't have any textbook solutions. You cannot be sure, you know, what's possible that might be done in so many unknowns that you're dealing with. And that's sort of the world that we live in today. So a lot of the work that we've been involved with over the years has really grown in importance to help our students understand that, you know, how do you actually engage in what we call sensing and probing and then responding in complex situations where you've got to make sense. You know, you're involved in sense making in real time. And 3D worlds offer a great environment for that. Go ahead, Cynthia.
They do. I was going to chime in there because our audience may not understand how we're defining complex and complicated. And I typed it in the text chat, but essentially, imagine life on Mars. You know, the ability to breathe, eat, sustain life, and, you know, work, you know. And so that would be a complex challenge that today we don't have a solution for, but we're working on it. Whereas a complicated problem, if I understood correctly, is one in which the solution's available. However, it might be unclear how to reach it, given the current state, the current resources, whatever. And so there's a lot of different options available, and the learner has to kind of find that pathway.
I often use the story with my students of having a Swiss watch given to you, and you know you're so excited to have this wonderful gift, and in your excitement it slips out of your fingers and falls to the floor and breaks apart in 1,000 pieces. And you know you get all the pieces, you put it on a table. It's not that I couldn't eventually figure out how to put the Swiss watch back together, but it may take several years. And that's a complicated problem where it is possible to know the unknowns given enough time. And but what if someone came along and they wanted to play a little game with me and they took some of the pieces away from the table and I didn't know it? So I don't know what's missing. And so you move from the realm of a complicated problem to a complex one where you may never know the unknowns, but it's still necessary to respond and to adapt and deal with the changes that you see that you're facing. So it's so many times in real life problems that we encounter, we really don't know how much we don't know, but we do our best, and we try to give that feeling and that experience to our students in the simulations that we design.
Well, may I pass the question to Scott? Actually, I would like, if I may ask, Scott Grant or Kaylee West, whichever you would like me to call you. Scott, I prefer Scott. Either is fine. Okay,
No
thank you. I'm so glad you made it. May I ask why and how are you using AI in your curriculum?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Helena. So I guess the story goes back to 2008 when we started using Second Life as part of our formal Chinese language and culture curriculum at undergraduate level at Monash University. So my students at the time, I had both beginner and third year students. And I guess I started out just in terms of virtual worlds, and then I'll move on to AI, but I started out trying to solve a problem that I noticed with my students. And that was that even my third year students, when it came to actually using the language in real life, I used to go with them at the end of each year to Shanghai and stay with them for 6 weeks. And so I had the chance to observe them in the real language environment. And I just found that even though, strictly speaking, they had the vocabulary, they had the sort of the language knowledge to be able to, for example, go and see a doctor, they didn't handle it very well. They generally would ring me in sometimes in the middle of the night and ask me to go with them to the doctor and help them explain what was wrong. And it always sort of puzzled me a little bit after 3 years of undergraduate Chinese language study, why, you know, they were in this situation when faced with real life, they couldn't really express themselves. So I started to think about, well, how during semester could I provide them with more opportunities to use the language where they're talking in situations which is similar to real life. It's one thing to sit in the classroom and go through exercises and you have a partner and you say, okay, well, you know, I'll say this and then you say that and then I'll say this and construct dialogues. That's great. That's really valuable. But I wanted something which is a little bit more like real life. So long story short, eventually after 2 years found Second Life, set up some virtual characters. We then set up a chat engine, which originally was scripted in PHP and on MySQL, but that turned out to be too difficult. So eventually in 2014, I was very fortunate to get a $50,000 Australian federal government grant. And we developed a new chat engine in Linden scripting language. And the benefit was that, you know, it kept it within the Linden servers. We weren't connecting outside of Second Life and so on. And anyhow, and then so the idea is that as part of our formal curriculum, our students do the usual lectures, small group tutorials, and then we take them into Second Life for several lessons during the semester, which are all task-based. The idea is to give them specific tasks on Chinese Island, which is a sort of a virtual Chinese township, where it combines things that they're currently learning in their textbook. And this was aimed also just at my beginner level students. So the third year students did do some things, but ultimately somebody else ended up teaching them. So I didn't continue with them in Second Life. So we took what the first year students, the beginner students were learning in their textbook, combined it with some things from real life in the scenarios which simulated real life. So things like, you know, going to a restaurant, buying goods at a farmer's market, going to see the doctor. I actually make the students sick at one point in one of the lessons and they have to go through the process of seeing a doctor. And that came directly from my experience with them in Shanghai. And the idea was that as part of what they're doing, the virtual characters all play specific roles. So obviously in the restaurant, the virtual character is a waitress. In the farmer's market, they're a seller, railway station, in the medical clinic. The virtual characters are playing roles of the nurses, the doctors, the waitresses, the ticket sellers, and so on. And then the students are given specific tasks to complete. Generally, I set the tasks up on Moodle, and there is a specific quiz that they need to follow to know what to do with the tasks. And it's all focused around students having to linguistically interact with the virtual characters to get information to be able to then answer the quiz questions, or in some cases, within the actual virtual environment itself, if they need to go from one location to another, they need to then know how to ask the virtual character, okay, so how do I go from here to there? And these are all things in their textbook, but it's not things that they normally would get a chance to practice in real life. So that's sort of the basis of what we do. Actually, Helena, if it was possible for you to play the first, to send out the link. So I've got a couple of links for some
Sure.
videos just to show what we're
Yes,
doing.
sure, certainly.
The
I'll
first
put
one
it
is the
in the
5-minute
chat.
video talking to the waitress. I can put that into chat if you like.
Don't worry, I can do it.
Okay, thank you. Anyhow, so Helena is very kindly putting a link into chat at the moment, which will show you a short demo of what we just did recently. So the week before last, I had 60 students test this. This week, I had 90 odd students test this. we've moved from the original chat engine, which was scripted in Linden scripting language, which was based on pattern matching, fairly basic pattern matching. I guess the fundamental is that if in the student's output to or input, depending on how you look at it, to the NPC, certain keywords are present, the chat engine will pick those up, and then it will produce a set response, both in text and in audio, and also with some body language built into the non-player characters. That worked well from 2008 to just recently. When I say work well, within certain limits, but that approach is a little limited. So there were often times when the students would say something. Mostly they were typing their questions or whatever it was to the virtual characters. And as part of my PhD, I did also look at, the benefits of typed language, as in typed conversational language, in terms of one's actual spoken language, and it's been shown there are benefits. But the problem was, if they typed a Chinese character incorrectly when they were talking to the virtual character, the virtual non-player character, then the feedback they got back was, "I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said. Could you please say it again?" And then the students had to kind of figure out what they'd done wrong. Or if they couldn't do that, they'd ask me, and I'd often say, "Listen, go back to your textbook, have a look at lesson number 3, dialogue number 2. There is an exemplar right there in your textbook of how you could actually say that." Because in these conversations with the NPCs, there's no menus. It's all just purely natural language input and output. So the students have actually got to work out, I know what information I need, but how do I ask for it? So they've got to sort of think as if they would, in a real life situation. So to try and address that inflexibility or that lack of flexibility in our Linden scripting language based chat engine, I started experimenting with ChatGPT. I started with Kat, who you can see sitting next to me, just to sort of see how it all works. I actually got the initial script to bring ChatGPT into Second Life on the marketplace. There was a free one there. Crix, C-H-R-A-X, was the person, but also, if anyone's interested, Stone Johnson also has produced a range of really good scripts for bringing ChatGPT and other generative AI into Second Life. And then on the basis of experimenting with Kat, I then moved on to changing the first of our virtual characters, the first of our non-player characters on Chinese Island that the students interact with, over to ChatGPT. So if you get a chance to watch that first video, you'll see me interacting with the virtual waitress. You'll also see an example of the Moodle quiz that, in a sense, guides what the students need to ask in their conversation. So it's not random at all. There's very specific things they need to find out from the virtual characters. And yeah, after, like I say, the week before last, with 60 students, all of whom were beginners, but they're background speakers. So they have some knowledge of a dialect, maybe not Mandarin, but they can't read or write. And so they're all learning Mandarin, but they have extra vocabulary in their heads, which my students, who are all non-background, don't have. So that was interesting too, because the old chat engine struggled a little bit with the students with background, because they'd often bring in expressions from their dialects. And of course, I couldn't anticipate that. And whereas with ChatGPT, it's pretty good at handling all sorts of variations, which is great. So it all went very smoothly. Stone Johnson's voice engine, which is real-time text-to-speech, worked extremely well. If anyone's interested in getting some more information about him and what he's doing, please let me know. His system covers all languages. We Mandarin Chinese for us, but Spanish, Italian, everything. Yeah, but I guess and again, I'm not anywhere near as expert as Cynthia or Andrew are. I ran into initial problems with ChatGPT. We were using 3.5 Turbo, which is very, very, very low cost. But the big problem I ran into was monthly token limits. What I discovered was that Chinese characters actually chew up more tokens than alphabet-based languages. So within the first week of a month, I'd used up all of the 160,000 token allowance for ChatGPT. So I'm very fortunate that I've been collaborating together with the National Taiwan Normal University for the last 10 years. They provided me with an institutional ChatGPT account, which is great. That has a much bigger token allowance. And for Kat, I moved, so sitting next to me in Second Life, I moved from ChatGPT to Mistral AI, which is a French company. They have a monthly token allowance of 10 million. So I'm never going to use that up, which is terrific. The only thing is, unfortunately, Mistral AI at the moment doesn't handle Chinese language very well. So basically with Kat, it's Spanish and English, which handles fine, no problem at all. They have a range of different sized models, and I'm using the smallest one, which is great for the sort of thing that, we just chat about stuff. In Kat's case, I've actually given Kat a personality and a memory. So I've added memory, which the APIs, as far as I'm aware, and Cynthia and Andrew, please correct me if I'm wrong, ChatGPT API does not give you any memory, at least as far as I'm aware. So I've built memory into the to Cat script so that she has a memory of the last 5 things she said, the last 5 things that somebody else says to her. At one point, I also built in spatial awareness in the sense of every time we'd travel around Second Life a lot. Every time we go to a new region, she would automatically gather the profile of that region and add it into the prompt so that she was contextually aware of where we were. I found that was, again, chewing up a lot of tokens. So I've cut that back, and there's 2 other functions I've given her to sort of make context clearer. One is you can type activity and then specify the activity you're doing. So then everything she says relates back to that activity. And the other one is mood. So I can actually change a mood at any point, depending on the circumstances. So yeah, that's basically what we've been playing around with. And I'm looking forward to converting our other non-player characters on Chinese Island in the other scenarios over to ChatGPT. So that's it. We're going to, well, sorry, the other thing you may see in that first video is we also got some students to use speech recognition. So the speech recognition built into Windows, and a lot of our students use Macs. And so in that demo video that Helena has sent a link for, that shows me using the speech recognition as well as typing. Helena, if you
Yes.
could please, if you could just drop in the next 2
yes,
links.
Sure. Here you are. I was ready. Yeah.
Thank you. We've also been working on a bot in VR chat, which I'm not sure if everyone's heard about, but that's both a desktop-based and a headset-based virtual world. The character in VR chat is called Bobby. Bobby originates from the person that I won't go into that, but anyhow, in the case of VR chat, there's no typing. You can only speak. So you can go in and you can talk to Bobby, but the problem is that you need to run Bobby on a separate computer. So at the moment, I haven't got to the point where I've got Bobby running in the cloud 24/7. The reason for developing Bobby was because our colleagues in National Taiwan Normal University are working with young people on the spectrum with autism. Part of their schooling is that they actually also work or they train in a restaurant that the autistic school runs. During the pandemic, they couldn't do that, so I developed a copy of that restaurant in Second Life, and they did their training in Second Life with a live teacher being the customer and the autistic students being the staff in the coffee shop. But what we're working towards is a VR version of that where they can go in 24/7. They can do their sort of internship, if you like, as waiters and waitresses, interacting with the bot, Bobby, that we're setting up. So that is also based on ChatGPT. It's a little more complex than in Second Life, but hopefully, yeah, in the next 6 months or so, we'll be able to get that going, and the students will be able to do their training anytime in a VR headset on VR chat. Sorry to talk so much.
You know, Scott, this is Andy. It sounds like, you know, from my perspective, the extra tokens that you were using for the logographs or the Mandarin languages, the engine is probably treating them each as an image file for the logograph. And so, yes, there's a higher token consumption for processing and interpreting images. It'd be fascinating to do a couple little tests with you to say generate a more complete image of logographs that like a paragraph and run different test cases through the engine. It will process and interpret images for the, if you go above 3.5, it does a very nice job, and you can submit an image and it will actually describe that image with some level of accuracy and detail. So that may be what it's doing in your situation, but fascinating work. You're doing absolutely fascinating. I love the fact that you're working on memory components and context sensitivity. We talk about that quite a bit in our platform. We can toggle the tone, the context. We can train the engines on context a little bit, but the memory issue is where I think you're really carving out new territory. That's something that everybody has noticed that works in the field, that we have to help build these memory systems, because you're absolutely right. They don't really do well in situating the actual conversation over time.
Yeah, it was just something, you know, I found when I initially started. You know, you'd say something and then 2 sentences later you'd say something else, and of course there's no memory. And that also was the problem with the non-player characters that we were using as part of our lessons. So for example, in English, you know, you could say something, I'll just make this up. You know, my father is an engineer, and yours? And in Chinese they have a similar expression. And the trouble was that with the original chat engine, the students would go, and yours, and of course that chat engine had absolutely no memory. That's the one that was fully scripted in LSL. And then of course I was thinking, wow, ChatGPT, you know, we'll be able to get around this problem. The students will be able to use this expression, which is something they learn in their class, you know, and yours, or what about you, without repeating the whole question. So that was where the sort of thing on the memory came up. I thought, well, wow, if they can, I want them to practice that. But we couldn't before. So
it's fascinating. Great work you're doing.
Thank you. Very amateur.
No, it's to me, what you're doing, the applied side, you're learning the constraints, and but you're able to work through those constraints. That's very admirable. That's exactly what we need.
Actually, I admire those of you that have the actual knowledge. I very quickly ran into a problem with ChatGPT and the Chinese characters, that it was not replying every time, and I couldn't work out what was going on. I thought it was, you know, throttling, whatever. Ultimately, it turned out to be JSON file problems, JSON object problems, which not wanting to get too technical. It's just this ChatGPT was sending back badly formed or incomplete JSON objects. Information was there, but it was not coming out in Second Life. And fortunately, my son-in-law, who's an IT professional, spent, I think it was, you know, he looked at it for 5 minutes, spent another 10 minutes, and he solved the problem. So even when the JSON files come back unformed or incomplete, we still get the information we need, and it feeds through and whatever. So
were you able to resolve it using the backend PHP scripts, or is that what he used?
No, just in LSL.
That is absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, I'm happy to share that with anyone. But yeah, he basically just looked at it. We could see that the information was coming back through the HTTP response without wanting to go too technical, but it just wasn't feeding through the scripts into chat and so on. And so he found a way to extract it out of the JSON object. And yeah, it was that was a breakthrough. It was terrific.
Yeah, well, I know, speaking for myself and most likely Sin too, but we would love to stay in touch with you, Scott. I really like the work that you're
Thank you.
doing.
Yeah, love to too. Thank you.
Well, you all sound as if you haven't encountered any difficulties throughout all this process.
No.
You
It's
make it simple. You make it so unbelievable, you know, free of any worries and any
Well,
obstructions.
I've
one
had
of the things that
Have you
difficulties. Yeah.
encountered anything that you'd like to mention? Any particular hardship you
Sure.
mentioned throughout the time, Cynthia?
Well, why don't we let Andy? Andy's going to talk about the technical part of it. The part that I've experienced, and I'll just throw this out there real quick, is with I teach doctoral students, right? And then I also teach in the virtual world with undergraduate and graduate students who are studying human computer interaction. And with these AI tools, and I'll just leave it at this, is I require references and evidence-based research, right? They write papers. And of course, I have difficulty with that because the GPT models tend to falsify the references or fabricate journal names. Or for me, they gave me 11 references for my published work in medical journals, and I've never published in a medical journal. So I'm always having to watch that side of it, the evidence side of it. Let me turn it over to Andy for the technical side.
Yeah, one of the things that I share with my students is, there's a literacy factor with these technologies, and the literacy factor has to deal with understanding that we're on a developmental journey with these capabilities. So right now, we're exposed to the open source community, the raw end of these initial GPT engines. And as we've already talked about, Scott's brought it up, they don't have any means to retain memories of interactions and so forth. And the second part of the literacy factor that we want our students to develop an appreciation for is understanding how these engines work computationally. They are not using human elements of intelligence to interpret. They're using correlational associations associated with clusters of words that are highly probable in terms of being related and in terms of how you put them together for complete sentences and context in which they're being used. But it's imperfect because it's a computational process. And so that's a really important insight for our students to understand. So we don't want to anthropomorphize the limits of what we see in these models right now. They're not lying, they're not deceiving, they're actually computationally deriving. And so there's inaccuracies. And when you build up the computational power, like you see from GPT 3 to 3.5 to 4.0, bit by bit, they're getting better. And like OpenAI is doing, they're putting filters in now. So, like Cynthia's issues with references, increasingly, we're going to see in the next several months capabilities where filters process before the output is delivered to the end user. So, if you're an academic using these systems, you're worried about references, it will filter the output into another routine that will check the accuracy of those citations and references. So bit by bit, we've seen the same thing. I deal with AI in medical applications, and the same journey took place in the medical community, in biomedical informatics. They've had to tweak those engines over time to give accurate medical histories, prescription diagnostics, and so forth. And so I often say that we're going to go through the same process in our use of GPT. So it's a teachable moment. If you're using AI with your students, I think you have to at least touch on the literacy factors of what they're experiencing, so they don't overjudge or underestimate or overestimate the capabilities.
Wow, I'm very proud of you. Your contributions to the field are unbelievable. Wow. So how do you see this developing in the future? How far will it go?
I get asked that question quite a bit in my military community. We do a lot of things on the military side with autonomous systems and robotics. I've always have underestimated the growth of AI. I've always been very conservative in my estimations, and I'm often having to go back to my students and the people I work with in the military to say, well, it happened much faster than I thought. So I'm at
Mhm.
that point now where I'm very careful to say, but when it comes for for example, in looking at systems that we see they're going to um, you know go from what I call the second wave of AI to the third wave. Third wave is where you've got super synthetic intelligence that um, you know will be claiming that they will supersede human abilities in certain areas. Now, in raw computational analysis of data, large data sets, and so forth, AI systems already supersede human capability. But when it comes to common sense reasoning, figuring out the right sort of thing to deal with from a set of experiences that we as humans use very well, we're not there yet with AI, and we're probably I still say that probably not within my lifetime we will see uh, AI take humans in that capability. The Because there's a lot of issues, and this I could go on and talk about it quite a bit about what the issues are technically, why we're having a hard time computing common sense to come up with ways to factor it in. But one of the things that just a real quick rubric just to remind your students is that the biggest factor for human common sense reasoning is experience, and these AI systems don't have that experience. You see, so it's not just factual information, whether it's how accurate it is and so forth, but it's also experience. So as we develop as human beings, we're bringing a lot of our experience into the insight process for making sense of things that we're interacting with, where AI cannot do that.
I think also from just a simple educator's perspective, I mean, it's interesting. The conversation in the West seems to be a lot about, will AI supersede human beings and are we in danger? Um, Whereas in the East, I don't see that conversation quite as much. It's more about, the potential to solve problems. Things like, in countries where you've got a ever-growing elderly population, they're becoming a larger percentage of the total population, and a shrinking work age population. There's particularly in places like China, there's lots of conversations about how AI and also robotics may help to, ease that situation. I don't think cat will become dangerous anytime soon. But from an
It is,
educator's perspective,
yeah.
I mean, the thing is, in their future work, students, if we're going to produce so-called, work-ready graduates, that's the big thing at our university. Obviously, AI is going to become an ever-increasing part of whatever jobs people take on in the future. So, as educators, we have, I guess, a responsibility to make them aware. I mean, in the case of Cynthia and Andrew, that's at a very technical level. In the case of, say, my students in the humanities, where they're never really going to get into the technical side of it, but just being aware of what the tools are, what their capabilities and limitations are, how to use them, what tools are useful for what situations. I think that's going to become a growing part of our job as our responsibility as educators as well.
Oh, I
So
agree.
it's not
I think
going
a lot
away.
of it is I often talk about, you know, AI is becoming, the best way I can encourage students to think about it too is an augmentation capability. You know, we want humans and AI to be teamed well, you know, to people understand how to join in the effort with these systems and understand their strengths and weaknesses. So yes, I think that's common ground that we have, Scott.
Yeah.
Yes, there was a presentation yesterday by Darcy Linden who talked about a companion and a universal translator, but probably need a little bit of more work. And I'm sure Heike can bring in a lot more information on this because she attended most of the lecture by the Virtual Education Consortium, if I remember well. So obviously there have been some disappointments, there have been a lot of successes, and there is still perhaps some measurements to be taken before all this technology continues developing, and a lot of ongoing research projects.
I was just thinking, Helena, in the area of translation, I came originally from a business background and was involved in a lot of commercial technical negotiations in China for a number of years. If I was a company going to sign contracts with another company in another country where, you know, more than one language is involved, particularly if you've got multi-million, multi-billion-dollar contracts, there's no way I'd be relying on AI to do any of that, no matter how good we might think ChatGPT or you know, I mean, Google Translate is, well, I guess it's getting better, but you know, when you've got huge, and between countries in the UN, you know, where the stakes are super high, we'd be fools to rely on AI. We need humans because the subtleties, the nuances, the AI is just, it's I don't know, light years away from being able to handle that, because you don't want to start a war because of a simple mistake that an AI makes.
I couldn't agree more, Scott. I think that's absolutely right.
Yes, Heike has just pasted the link to the YouTube live stream, and you can actually watch the whole presentation from yesterday.
Oh, great.
Very good points brought in here. Yes. All right. Would you like to ask any questions? Anybody from our audience? Let me check. Yes, I think
May I just ask, if AI is capable of translating so well, why do we need to learn a language?
Good point.
I mean, I
Conflict
guess
of professions.
I guess there's a, you know, there's obviously the human element. So you know, I'm thinking about traveling. I guess for a lot of people, having a portable translator can really help with transactional things. You know, how much is this? Where, you know, which way do I go to get there? But I guess when you get down to that sort of building human relations, it could be a bit tricky. I don't know, with mechanical translation or AI translation in between. It just doesn't have that human element, that human warmth that you get by learning a language. And I guess the other thing is, for a lot of situations, if you just demonstrate to the other party that you've made the effort even to learn a little bit of their language, it just changes everything. They're you know, the way that they treat you, they see you've made an effort. I mean, that's the trouble with English. It's just expected that everyone speaks English. But if you go to France, you know, here in Australia, people say, forgive me, you know, the Parisians are horrible. You know, they if you don't speak French, they're horrible. But we didn't find that, and we just found if we just made a little effort to say a few things, people were terrific. It just changed the whole sort of dynamic. So I think that's the reason why, even if we don't learn to necessarily very high levels, but also it gives us insights into how people from other cultural and linguistic backgrounds view the world. Their
Yes.
perspective is
Mm.
often quite different, and it's
I would-
reflected in their
would say-
language.
I would say, Scott, that that's a key part too. Is just cognitively, it helps you to deepen a sense of the wonderful different perspectives that's across cultures. When you learn another language, that enriches your cognitive appreciations and abilities. I believe that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It gives you little insights that you know, AI translation is not necessarily going to give you. So
Yes. What about human sanity? What about our biological balance? Exactly. We need to use our brains,
Mm-hmm.
and we can't get an AI system to think for us. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Although it may
yeah,
sound a bit selfish as a human being to claim that we need to have this unique kind of capacity, but still, being replaced is too much.
I often,
we already do it. We offload a lot of our cognitive load into the environment. We're already doing it. So
yes.
every time you put your keys in the same place at home when you come home, you're offloading that cognitive load of where are my keys onto the environment. And you know, every time I go back to that location, my keys will be there. I mean, and then of course we get flustered when our keys aren't there for some reason. We're sort of already doing it, but I think what Helena is saying, there's a limit to how far we offload our cognitive abilities onto external things like AI.
I think this discussion that's being held all around the world about what makes us as humans unique compared to a computational machine and AI as they grow increasingly capable, it's really helped to foster a discussion about what it is that cognitively or experience wise makes us very distinctive that cannot really ultimately be replicated by a machine. And that's created really fascinating discussions between people.
One area where I would like to see AI play a much larger role. My mother, who's 87, has dementia, and she still fortunately recognizes myself and my wife and our daughters and so on. But friends she knew for 20, 30 years. It's the old story with dementia. She will sit there, she'll talk to them for half an hour or so, and then afterwards Dad will say, "Oh, Ned, do you remember who that is?" And she'll go, "No, I have no idea." Or sometimes she'll just quietly lean over to Dad and say, "Who is this person? Can you please make them go?" So AI, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I don't have the technical expertise, but bringing together AR and AI, where a person with dementia maybe could wear glasses, and this could actually provide memory for them through some kind of localized facial recognition, where they look at someone in the family and in their glasses, the AI picks it up and then says, "Right, this is your son Scott, or this is your daughter-in-law Liha," or whatever it is. I don't know if that's an
I
area
think
where we
that's a
do want to
wonderful
offload.
example. Yes. I have a mother-in-law who's suffering this in the same effects, and I think that's wonderful, Scott. That would be a great way to augment declining abilities.
So now we need you and Cynthia to get your students to develop it.
Yes. Well, I know a number of
Most
our
students would be
students have gone
hopeless.
on. Yeah.
And there's some very nice music in the background. I wonder if that's from Odalis, our camera in Second Life.
Maybe
I'm
the
not
local
hearing any
music on the property.
Oh no, I don't have any. We don't have any. It's also I've muted my sound in Second Life.
Wow.
I had some feedback as well in the background running a video, and I thought it was
It's pleasant,
but
quite
yeah,
pleasant.
isn't it? Can I just throw something in, because what you said to be one of those skills that is utmost difficult. You can fly to Mars, you can fly to the moon, and there are people who actually learn how to become astronomers and in a lifetime, and say with a master study, 10, 15, 20 years. but it's said to be so difficult to learn a language, even though language learning in comparison to medical science, tech, whatever, is relatively speaking not so difficult. Wow, right? And now the interesting thing is with AI is, first of all, we had a demonstration this morning by Sophia, the robot, turning up at a Greek expo, and she spoke fluently Greek. We couldn't make a word of it. I mean, Helena tried to translate because we had a live demonstration of Sophia being on stage there. And obviously capable of speaking 20 languages. And these AIs, how come they're so capable of speaking other languages and so fluent and so correct? And we humans don't even manage to learn a language sometimes in a lifetime.
Well, I think it has to deal with, from a cognitive perspective, the ways that immersively, as when we're younger, we can acquire language, as it were, for the necessity of getting things done, being understood, and so forth. I know every time I've taken a foreign language, it's been very important for me to be immersed for some period of time. But when I'm pulled out of that environment, I often regress. German is an example for me. I took academic German, but when I travel through Germany, there's nuances with the dialects. And so that's something I didn't acquire. With computational language systems, they're able to associate, but if you ask for specific meanings in any deep contextual way, you'll find the fault lines. And so there's a difference between being able to translate and understanding the origins, the subtleties of the idioms that are used in language and so forth, that the systems are not really there yet.
I think the other thing that comes into it, and going back to Heike's question, I mean, we all know that with human language, exposure is really important. And I guess that's the thing with little kids. In their native language, they're exposed from the minute that they, appear in the world, and it's constant, it's every day. Whereas, most of us have learned a foreign language through the sort of classroom type situation. And of course, that was my problem that got me thinking about Second Life was, as soon as my students walked out of the classroom, their exposure to the language basically, for a lot of them, ended until the next class. I mean, of course, they go home, they do their set assignments and that sort of thing. But I found when I was living in China, particularly when I was living at my parents-in-law's place, I was exposed to the language every single day. And it was all very simple, everyday language, things that you'll never learn from a textbook. So I'm just wondering with the AI, I mean, Andrew mentioned before the billions, the gazillions points of data that they're trained on. I totally agree with his point about the subtleties, the nuances, and so on. I mean, that would be beyond most AI now. But the fact that AI that you said, Sophia, whatever it was, seemed to speak fluently. I mean, it's exposed, if I can use that word, to billions of training data to be able to do that. And the human brain doesn't get that opportunity more than, once or twice in a lifetime.
That's a good point. Doris has just typed in the chat box about AI translation and human language learning being different processes with their own strengths and weaknesses. Yes, Doris, that's true. AI translation systems excel at processing large amounts of text quickly. They may lack the nuance and cultural understanding that humans bring to language. Yes. Yes, there are
And
so
of
many
course, we forget,
elements.
sorry, Helena, we forget body language. We forget
True.
facial expressions. That is so much, a part of how we communicate.
Yes.
So AI is not there yet.
And Joyce is adding neuroplasticity refers to the brain's physical capabilities to continue learning and how the brain evolves over time. Yes, to how readily it can learn and remember.
And there's some good things about being able to forget.
Oh,
You know, we're a parsimonious system. You know, we tend to shave off things that distract us, and so we can focus and have attention. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the areas in AI that is still very difficult, is how to have attention mechanisms work effectively. You know, when you're dealing with novelty and systems that are encountering things in the environment they've never been trained on. You know, so that's where a lot of effort's being applied right now.
Cynthia is referring to it as an ability to forget.
Yes.
Wow, wonderful. Very nice discussion. And I don't know if you would like to add anything. Time does fly with you, really. And I'm really glad we managed to put you three together, four actually, including Kathy. And so
Well, I think it's been a wonderful opportunity. Thank you so much for the invite. I
it's
often
amazing
find
to see.
myself, yes, it's amazing the people you get a chance to meet in these forums that you've put on and have the opportunity to connect from halfway around the world. It's marvelous. Thank you.
It's
And it's
marvelous
Yeah,
seeing
it is.
how each one of you have been using these technologies in your own profession and what kind of conclusions we can draw from that as linguists, as scientists, as military personnel, whatever kind of background we come from. Thank you so much.
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you very much for having us.
You're wonderful.
It's great.
And perhaps next we would like to see Scott teach us how we can merge sound with the Johnson's kind of text-to-speech kind of device. That would be
Yeah,
wonderful
in
if you could do
Second
that
Life,
for
that's a
us.
real problem. Stone is actually an academic in the US. Don't know where exactly. I guess I'll find out at some point. But he's very interested in tonight's panel. Unfortunately, he couldn't, watch, but he can watch the recordings. It might be worth following up with him at some point, just to see, what his thoughts and things are. But the real-time text-to-speech has been fantastic.
Yes.
And we in our WebClean platform, we have a tool that does that. We should run some tests with you, Scott.
Oh, hey, that'd be
Yeah,
good.
yeah. So there'd be great to stay in touch with you.
Yes, I'd
Yes,
love to.
please. Cynthia, Andrew, and Scott, Kaylee, thank you. I
Thank
can't
you.
thank you enough. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.